Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Roundtable. So great to see everybody. Our team of coaches today are going to talk about prayer and meditation, the things that are the same, the things that are different, the kind of things they've tried and been successful with. And all of us have coached people around prayer and meditation, so it's a topic with a lot of information and nuance, and I'm excited to get this underway. So as always, we begin with my amazing slide. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, here we go. Present mode. Ta-da! Okay. So our coaches roundtable discussion today is about prayer and meditation. And I just wanted to show in our two different pictures that we have that you have an opportunity to pray with people, to meditate in a group. You can do that in person or online, or also to have a private practice of prayer and meditation. So let's go to our next slide. So this is a little hat tip to my father, who taught Brian and I how to meditate. And he was a meditation teacher for about 50 years, I think. But the way that she's smiling as she's sitting in a meditation, it could also be prayer. My dad nicknamed that the Arlie Mudra. And a mudra is sort of like how you do your fingers or how you might place your hands. He encouraged people to begin their session of meditation or prayer with a smile, to anticipate the contentment, and to smile as you began. So I found a smiling person. So we have some research that is in the show notes, and there's 25 years of research on meditation and mindfulness and prayer in psychology journals and in medical journals about how it lowers your blood pressure and it helps you regulate your emotions or your nervous system and anxiety. There's many, many studies. So we notated a few in our research notes. Engaging in a quiet stillness can be a kind of meditation. Sometimes in Zen meditation, I think they call it Zazen, you sit still in quiet and stare at the wall with your eyes unmoving. So you are just in the stillness. And that's a form of meditation. We encourage you to be comfortable, but not to fall asleep. So you can meditate before sleep, certainly can pray before sleep. But if you're upright, you're actively engaged in your practice. And then when you lay down, you can go to sleep. We recommend building a practice routine, and all of our team of coaches today will speak to the different routines they themselves practice or recommend for clients. We encourage you to try different methods and see what works for you. Over the years of teaching people meditation and engaging in prayer, different things have worked for different people at different times in their lives. So be open to deepening a prayer or meditation practice or trying something a little bit different. Scripture prompts are very popular. There's a contemplative prayer practice that's popular in some monasteries and Christian religious environments, where you take very particular scripture and you review the prompts in a particular way as part of the entry into your prayer process on a given day. Contemplative prayer. There are a lot of meditation and prayer audios out there, apps for your phone, videos on YouTube. In fact, in our community, and we'll have a link where you can join for free, Coach Jonathan has a meditation that you can listen to as a video. And Brian, you did some audio meditations as part of our recent challenge series. We'll be
Mhm.
putting those into the community soon. So mix it up. There are times where group prayer or group meditation can feel very empowering and you feel like you're a part of a devotional community. Whether you're inside or outside or doing a solitary practice, it can be helpful sometimes to go on a retreat and pray or meditate with others. Listen in the no thought silence. So, for early meditators, people that are new, wrangling the thought stream can sometimes be the job one, making time and finding yourself to the place where you're in silence and have no thoughts. Setting your intention as you begin is a little bit like the Arli Mudra with a smile, anticipating a contented experience. Journaling your insights afterwards, and certainly Dean can speak about this, but capturing realizations or a new perspective can help you process the spiritual changes that you're embarking upon. And then finally, being grateful to be alive, grateful to be breathing in and breathing out, grateful for your relationship with the divine as you are developing it. So gratitude gives you a high vibration, and being grateful at the end of your process can be helpful too. Okay, here's our last slide. Okay, I don't know why it's looking like this, but I guess I can move it around. Nope, I can't. Oh no. Well, we may be skipping our memes because the slide was funny, but let's stop our share. Yeah.
Good.
So the meme that was my favorite was a priest sitting on a bench talking to an otter, and the otter was explaining to the priest, I'm pretty sure it's do unto otters as you would have done unto yourself. He's straightening out the priest. It's about the otters. So, okay, Brian, can you kick us off about prayer and meditation?
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that. So it's funny to think about like what is if an animal were to have a concept of God, what would be their concept? Like do otters have the otter God, you know? That's that's funny to me to think about. So let's start with talking about prayer.
Okay.
I think people should try praying to angels. That's what I think. I'm gonna suggest that people try that. And I've had some, success with that. I've definitely had times where that very clearly helped me in my life. Like, and there's times where there was obviously an external result that came. There's other times where I just felt like, wow, this went a lot better than I think it would have gone if I wouldn't have prayed to angels about this. Like, I just felt that energy in it. It might sound a little bit irreverent. Like, I mean, maybe some people might think, well, you shouldn't just pray to try to get stuff from angels. But I think that these higher beings can help you. And I think, they may be, that may be their job. Maybe that's why God created angels, is to help lower beings like us. Um, so I would recommend people try that. And in my own experience, might be sound a little wrong to say, but I feel that my prayers have been more answered when I prayed to angels as opposed to praying to like God. That's been my experience. So who knows what the reason for that is? The angels like me more than God does. I don't know. Um, but anyways, I'm just throwing it out there because it might help some people. Um, and I really like what Jesus said in the original Aramaic when he was talking about how he prayed to God. So he used the word Abba to refer to God. And I was talking about this before the show. That doesn't mean father. It means more like papa or like dad or daddy in the original Aramaic. And I think this is really important because to me, it's suggesting having an intimate relationship with God. like feeling like you're building a connection, like an emotional rapport with God. Not talking to God like as if God's the principal of your school and you're just trying to not get in trouble or you're trying to not fail the grade or something, you know? Establishing like an intimate kind of an emotional connection of feeling. And I actually think probably I think your prayers will be more effective if you do it that way, but also you'll feel more of that connection, which is extremely valuable in and of itself. And honestly, I think it would be best if we created more of that intimate kind of relationship with everything. I view everything that's created as a manifestation of the divine. So I think it would be great if we try to feel more intimate with nature, with animals, with the birds, with trees, with even with strangers. It doesn't mean you have to like do everything to help them, but when you spend those few moments with them, be with their spirit. Have it be a little bit more of an intimate thing. It doesn't mean you have to be, knowing them for life or whatever. But in my interpretation, I think this is part of what Jesus was advocating for. And, I study different spiritual traditions. I don't identify as any one religion, but I think there's a lot of valuable teaching there. So I'm gonna throw that out there. Um, Also, I actually kind of have the sense now, and I'll just keep getting more wild and weird as we go here. I kind of have the sense now that a lot of our lives are actually mediated through higher beings. I'm starting to get this feeling like angels, demons, these types of things. To me, I think those things exist. And I think that a lot of aspects of our lives are kind of mediated through them. So if you kind of establish a connection, if you're like staying in that link, I feel like things can go a lot better for you personally. So I'm not arguing that anyone become a particular religion or particular denomination. I come from the perspective that it's just good to connect. It's just good to connect to the divine in some way. Um, so, and also to some extent, I think we need assistance. Like, I think humans need help. I think they need assistance from higher beings. The truth is, it might sound a little bit rough, but there are so many things that can go wrong in any person's life. And if you kind of don't have some higher power helping you or assisting you or blessing you or protecting you, I think that could be kind of rough. You can die like that. You can get sick like that. And that happened to me. So, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness that's like incurable. I felt great the day before. The next day, I was wrecked. And then, I thought I was going to die. Like, I had all these symptoms, like, my neck was getting paralyzed. My eyes went cross-eyed. I was having neurological issues. And then I went to the hospital. My voice ended up getting damaged. They were like, it's incurable. And like I've been living with that for what, 7 years now, Mom, or something.
Hmm.
So things can change real quick for you. And I feel like if you go through things like that, you start to realize you kind of need to have some kind of connection to the divine, some kind of protection or something blessing you or assisting you through this. Because there's so many things that can happen to you that you can't predict or defend against. Human life is very fragile, actually. It really can be. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And to some extent, this feels kind of messed up, but it's very true. To some extent, we're in a cosmic game where we don't even know the rules. There's some truth to that. Like, we don't know what's going to happen to us after our death. Somehow, the things we do in life determine where we end up going. We don't know all the rules to that. So it's almost like, in a way, it's kind of like you're on trial, but you don't know the laws. So it's like you don't know what you did wrong. You kind of need an advocate for you in that situation. I'm saying connect to God or the divine or angels. Like you kind of need something assisting you when you're in that situation. And I also feel it's the same way in society. Like, you're born into an economy. No one really teaches you how money works, how investment works, how retirement works, but you got to play the game.
Mhm.
Like, there's a sense in human life where we're in games where we don't even know all the rules. No one's even explained it all to us, but you have to play. So I feel like when you're in that situation, getting some kind of help from higher power is very good. So I wanted to say that. So moving on to meditation. Um, I think silence is great. And I actually think silence leads to stillness in meditation. So the more you quiet down your mind, like as the mind gets silent, you become more still. And I believe that that clarifies your perception of things within yourself, just within reality. You start to become more intuitive about it all. Whereas the constant franticness of do this, do that, think about this, think about that, it distorts your perception. It's like your head's always moving, so you can't see clearly. Like you don't have a clear image. When it stills down, you can start to see, intuitively feel the truth about things more. So that's kind of more the approach of meditation. And I also think that's very good. And I think like in general, in American society, we tend to not assume that. Like people tend to not assume that they can clarify their perception more just by meditating. But I think that is possible. And I've had, experiences in meditation, things have happened. So I've experienced some truth of this. Not that I'm an advanced meditator, but I've had some experiences. Um, and yeah, I would say as you quiet down, as you still down, it's like, it's kind of like a lake, right? If there's ripples in the lake, you can't see the reflection, but once it gets perfectly still, it can be like a mirror. And you can start to intuitively feel and see the truth about yourself more. I also think you can start to see your subconscious more, which normally is hidden, but you'll start to perceive more of the underlying things going on in you that normally you don't see in your conscious, normal day-to-day state. But also another thing that's great with meditation is just any way you can create a source of well-being from within yourself, where it's not dependent on anything outside. I think that's fantastic. That is just like ultimate. That's so strong. That's such a strong move in life to have that. If you're not dependent on money or this relationship or this person or that or this thing going right, if you just have a source of well-being that you can learn to tap into within yourself, that's great. And of course, you can enjoy all the other things in life, but if you're not like dependent on them, where you're going to feel like you're wrecked if it doesn't go your way, if you have that source of well-being from within, that's super helpful. So that's what I wanted to say. Everyone else can jump in. Don't have to agree, but that's what I wanted to share.
I have a little story, and then we'll see if Dean or Jonathan would like to go next. I was watching a Tucker Carlson podcast, and he was interviewing Dave Smith, who's a comedian, and recently was in a debate with someone and kind of came up in the news. Apparently, he's been a well-known comedian for years. I'm afraid I didn't know about him. But he was raised in the Jewish faith. Brian, you talked about, do we have rules to the game? Well, we're taught 10 commandments. We may be taught how to live a virtuous life. We may be taught religious observance rules, where if you like, there's a pattern and a rhythm to how to live a good life. But then things happen to us. And so you can't be a virtuous person and understand that you're now inoculated from any bad thing ever happening to you, because we
Yeah.
know tornadoes come, a fire could burn down your house, the factory can close, things will happen to us in our lives, and there's no way to live that we are inoculated from difficulty. Just life presents difficulty. So Dave Smith talked about how while he was very smart and was being a successful comedian and making money, raised in a culturally Jewish household, but not particularly a religious one. He got married, and she was the love of his life. And pretty soon they were pregnant with their first child. So it was within the first year, 18 months. And he hadn't really contemplated God in any personal, real way. They did seders, they did the cultural traditions, but it was like because how he was raised and just what you did. And as they gave the epidural to his wife in the hospital, there were complications. They sent him out of the room, and he's in the hallway in the maternity ward, and it struck him, Brian, what you said, life is so fragile. He could be going home from the hospital alone. His wife and the baby inside could die on that gurney, 7 feet from where he's leaning against the wall. And it's all outside of his control. It just hit him like a ton of bricks. And for the first time, he prayed. And he said, I knew instantly there was a God there who could help me, who was listening. And I never knew that before. But now it was all on the line. And I said, look, Dave said, I'll do whatever you want. Keep the wife and baby alive. I want to go home with both of them when this is over. Do what you have to do to protect them. And then anything you want me to do, I'll do. But there was no question in his mind that there was a divine presence, no question that he could supplicate to them and pray on behalf of his wife and child. It turned out fine. But he said, if you had asked me before that moment, would I ever pray to God? I wouldn't have, I would like, well, maybe there's a God, we go through the motions. He absolutely knew in that hallway help was available, and he asked for it. And that was a turning point in his life. He now prays every day. And, but, you hear these stories about, there was another person recently on a podcast who had fought in Fallujah, and he was under mortar fire and no help was coming. And he realized this might be the end. Like, I might not get out of this. So he takes his helmet off, and he has a picture of his two baby daughters taped on the inside of the helmet, which is something I guess soldiers do. And he said a prayer. He said, get me out of this so I can go home to these girls. And then I'll settle my books. Like anything that's unfinished, any mistakes I've made that have not been rectified, I'll settle my books. Just get me out of this. And he had never prayed like that before either. But yeah, I think sometimes life can present us with opportunities where all of a sudden we are looking for a connection to the divine. And I guess as coaches, we would encourage you to do that ahead of time, maybe before you find yourself in that difficult intersection, wondering if help is available. Maybe have a relationship with God or the divine or some sort of process that works for you in advance of that crying fit in the hallway, hoping that your wife and child survive the procedure. So, Dean, would you like to go next and talk about prayer and meditation?
Well, I have many thoughts. Do you want to ask me a question?
I would love to.
Okay.
I wonder if you could talk about the active use. Before we started, we talked about one of the things that's different about prayer versus meditation is you have the concept of an answered prayer,
Mm.
where you're holding this intention and you really need a new job, or you need to sell the house, or you need your child to get well, whatever that is, and you perceive divine intervention on your behalf or on their behalf. The concept of that was an answered prayer. That's a little different than meditation. That in meditation you gain insight, you finally understand something, but it's not quite like an answered prayer. I know you've had prayers answered, Dean, so
So
you could
let me
speak
start
about
with
that.
my understanding of the distinction. Maybe
Okay.
that'll.
Mhm.
It seems to me that, and I'm definitely not an expert on meditation, but it seems to me that the purpose of a meditative practice is awareness. Sort of what Brian was saying, right? That the purpose of meditating is to become more aware of realities both inside and but particularly particularly inside of you. And
Mhm.
I think when Brian was saying meditation helps you to sort of sense your unconscious, I think that is like the key benefit is that you begin to be able to see what what you have hidden from yourself. You get to be in a position where you're able to examine your shadow in a way that you cannot without when your life is lived in almost entirely on the surface, so to speak. And that I think is, extremely valuable. I don't in any way want to downplay that. As we were talking about prayer, it occurs to me that one of the things I have kind of talked about in coaching with clients is in AA, for example, the a lot of the AA material just talks very simply about asking God to remove your character defects.
Mhm.
And I have at times, people struggle with, lots of different kinds of destructive behaviors or compulsive behaviors or whatever it is. And while there are lots of strategies we can deploy for changing behavior, I do think that prayer, and this is sort of what you're getting at, I think, prayer is about a kind of communion with another, right? In a way that meditation is a way, I think, of increasing your ability to examine yourself,
Mhm.
but prayer is about communion. So maybe prayer is what follows meditation in a way, right? That through meditation I become aware of my shadow, and in prayer I can ask to have my character defects removed.
Mhm.
Um, but when I have suggested that to clients, it sometimes comes as a surprise, even to like very devoutly Christian clients or whatever. Something quite that simple um, doesn't necessarily occur.
Mhm.
And I think too that we need to talk about when we talk about prayer, I think we have to acknowledge that prayer is a complicated concept where the word refers to multiple things that we don't necessarily have a distinct word for each one. So if you go to church and someone reads the prayer out of the prayer book, that's a ceremonial prayer that serves a ceremonial function, which is not bad. It's good, but it's a different thing than sort of private communion with God. That focuses around your own personal growth. And we can talk about answered prayer, and I I wouldn't doubt that at all, right? But I think ultimately the the ultimate answer to prayer is almost always growth of your own spirit. And even when you pray about external realities, right? You need a new job.
Mhm.
Those come about because you have become the kind of person for whom life unfolds in that direction. Again, this is I feel like Brian, like I'm getting more woo as I keep talking. But that I mean, obviously bad things happen to people that aren't their fault,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Um, I think one thing we mean by one thing that I like to mean by prayer is almost in addition to words said to God, is a kind of a posture toward life in which you are reverent and receptive and open at all times.
Mhm.
And that really what causes people to suffer is their protective impulse to shut down and kind of move out of that prayerful stance in life. And that the way we engage prayerfully about the things that we need and want is by surrendering to the process that we encounter in prayer that shapes us in such a way that we exert a different kind of influence over our own situations, right? So, um, for example, guy needs a job. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. Guy needs a job, right? So it might be, but he instead of applying for jobs, he just watches Netflix all day.
Oh
Okay.
dear.
Well, so this is just trying to be an obvious example. So should that guy pray for his character defect of whatever it is, anger at the system, just just straight up sloth, whatever?
Mhm.
Should he pray to have a character defect removed? That might indirectly help him to apply for more jobs, get a job, etc. And I just think there's a really tight connection between a life lived prayerfully in a prayerful stance, the sort of quality of the character that builds in us, and the way we exert influence over reality to create outcomes for ourselves. Those are all very tightly connected.
Mhm.
But it begins with that attitude of openness and receptivity and surrender. That's just me rambling, but I don't know if I answered
I
any
think that's
question or not.
wonderful. Yeah, we at a life designed, and in our community, we want to find ways for people to cooperate with creation, however that's determinative for them. And so I know, Jonathan, I want to turn to you. And, Sadhguru likes to remind us that, we are not the body, we are not even the mind, we are that which animates the body and the mind. We are the spirit within. And in our day-to-day life, when we brush our teeth with the right hand or the wrong hand, we have a physical experience, but there is the opportunity for a feedback loop of some kind where you are cooperating with creation, however you experience that, whether that feedback loop is in meditation, using alchemical hypnosis with Jonathan, and identifying limiting beliefs, or identifying character flaws and saying, I could shift that, I could release that, I could live differently. There are steps that you can take in prayer, in meditation, where you're actively participating for your own benefit. And the world responds to that in a feedback loop that you individually find your way to. So, Jonathan, how would you like to talk about prayer and meditation?
Yes. Well, first of all, the most important thing in my experience with clients is I have seen people not meditate ever in their lives and only pray, and life works like wonders for them.
Mhm.
I have seen the opposite as well. People not praying, just meditating, and life goes wonderful for them as well.
Yes.
Now, in my experience of life, prayer is like you want to contact the source of the creation. It's like you're giving a phone call.
Mhm.
Now, because you're giving a phone call, this source may answer, might be busy, may send you to voicemail. Who knows? You never know.
If
It might be in a
Jesus isn't
it
taking your
might be in a
calls, yeah.
cosmo in the like a in a meeting with another beings. Who knows?
Mhm.
So now meditation, in my experience, it has allowed me to realize that whoever I used to pray or like want to contact, let's say for example, angels,
Mhm.
Jesus Christ, just like the source, like anything higher than yourself as a human,
Mhm.
by means of meditation, I have realized that you can actually be in touch and become whatever that it is that you are trying to contact in the first place.
Mhm.
Now, that puts you in a very powerful position because for a moment, let's say whatever the amount of time that you are meditating, you are actually acknowledging that you are God.
Mhm.
Now, God spelled backwards is dog. And whenever I have looked at my dog, like when I had pets before, they look at me like, "Hey, don't look at me, man. I am not it." So it is beautiful to understand that there is not just one way to connect with whatever energy that it is that created this. You, me, Brian, Dean, myself. So there's there's different ways to connect with it. Personally, I will go with meditation because I will rather be the creator than having to depend to see like, hey, are you there? No, okay, I'll call you back. Because prayer, it will work if you have faith, but you do not know like the mechanics of it. Like, what if what if you're not doing it with the right intention, with the right intensity, with the right devotion? What if you? There's so many variables. Now, when you start meditating, even if you're like the most beginner person, there's something because it becomes a quality. So you actually become meditative. So during the day, at times, you will remind yourself, hey, whatever the source of creation, it is actually within myself. And then you tap into it, and it gives you this, it's like a euphoric um, sense of being. So yeah, I will go with meditation, but I have seen prayer work amazingly, and actually the I have seen people being like so in disbelief, like surprised, and let's say they prayed to like Mary or something like. Also, um, I remember when I was younger, I had this intrusive thoughts because I used to think, well, yeah, we pray to Jesus Christ. I come from a Catholic background, for example. Mm. So I remember thinking we pray to Jesus Christ, but these other guys they prayed to some other guy, and then I went to India, and then you have the monkey god, and and and
Honey.
all this kind of. And America says, "In God we trust." Which one is? So at the end, everything is energy. So it doesn't matter which God you're trying to contact. There's only one. Now, would you like to having to be calling and calling to see if they answer, or would you like to become that which is it that will answer if you pray? It's a lot of responsibility, but it is possible in my experience, and it is actually extremely beautiful. It just takes a lot of focus and not Netflix watching, but actually practicing.
Well, I love your perspective. You know, in the Indian tradition, Brian and I have studied that with yoga philosophy. They have people who have a orientation towards a devotional nature. They call them bhakti. And people who have an orientation towards a philosophical nature, and they call them jnana, right? People who have the orientation towards being strongly embodied, body identified, and they do hatha yoga. And so understanding that people have different orientations, how they arrive at an intersection that involves the divine for them, or if it's source and there's no religious, prescription attached to how you do this engagement. I think that, you can pray to meditate better. You can meditate upon contemplative prayers that are moving you in the direction of some understanding you've been seeking. And so I don't know that it's one or the other, except at a life design, we encourage you to find your way to walk your path. And there may be a few intersections along there where you get that internal direction. But I think all of us in our lives have had the experience where just the right teacher came at the right time, or just the right book was referred to us, or just the right poem. I was describing to Brian that I came across Rumi, the Sufi poet, because one of his famous short poems was on the front of a greeting card. And the poem says, beyond right doing and wrong doing, there is a meadow. Meet me there. and it just like broke me open. I'm standing there reading a greeting card, and it's a poem from Rumi. So I'm not a practicing Sufi, but I respect that tradition. It's kind of the esoteric part of the Islam faith. And so wherever you find it, you can find inspiration to help you along your unique path. And we encourage you to pursue those things. We have a team of coaches ready to help you. But yeah, let's do a round of final thoughts and how people get a hold of you. Brian, do you have some final thoughts, and how do we find you?
Yeah, so going back to what Dean said, kind of addressing what everyone said, but going back to what Dean said, I do think, Dean, what you were mentioning about your stance towards life, I think that's very key. So I don't think with things like prayer and meditation, it's not just about the truth claim. So if you have like some people who are like atheists, which is fine, you can be an atheist, but for people who only believe that science is the only source of truth, stuff like that, they might say, well, how do you know it's true? Or you can't prove this. There is evidence that these things work. But even despite that, if you just set aside the truth claim, there's the question of how do you want to go through life? There's your stance towards life. Do you want to go through life feeling like you're basically a chimpanzee and you're just trying to acquire resources? That's it. I mean, is that how you want to go through life?
Mhm.
Or do you want to go through life feeling like you can connect to the divine? This is all a manifestation of the divine. Like there's sacred meaning involved in every aspect of your life. To me, it sounds a lot better to go through life like that, whether it's a provable truth claim or not. And there is evidence to suggest that these things work. Um, Real evidence. I mean, you can even do scientific studies about it. And that exists already. So,
Mhm.
but there's also the question of what kind of stance towards life, what kind of orientation towards life do you want to have? How do you want to actually go through your existence? I think that's a really important question. I think that's really important. And it sort of gets to the point, Mom, you brought up the stories of those people who, in very dire situations, prayed, and that touches on the saying, there's no atheists in foxholes, right?
Mhm.
Which means like in a war zone.
Mhm.
But the thing is, there's 10,000 different foxholes. It's not just a war zone.
Mhm.
It can be divorce, it can be death, it can be
Hospital
disease,
corridor in the
it
pregnancy
can
ward.
be,
Yeah.
there's 10,000 different kinds of things
Mhm.
that you can come up against that you may not be ready for. And a lot of times, those are the moments someone turns towards prayer, like almost instinctively, like intuitively.
Wonderful. So, Dean, would you like to share a final thought, how we find you?
I would only say this, and that is that I think it's important for people to recognize that prayer or meditation, that these are not hobbies. These are intrinsic parts of human life, the way that, say, music is not a hobby, but it's something that people do naturally when they are um, in something like a position, in any kind of position to do it. It's a natural part of human life. And it goes to Brian's thing about, well, people who are skeptical about it. And I would say, but it's not a question of do you know it's true? It is, are you functioning fully as a person? And that full human, the full human experience includes these kinds of practices. Um, and that it's a bad idea to restrict yourself from these sorts of fundamentally human and inwardly nourishing practices. People can find me at deanabbott.com, at alifedesign.org, and on Twitter at deanabbott.
Oh, wonderful. Cool. Jonathan, born on the Day of the Dead, any final thoughts from you?
But
And how do we find you?
yeah, final thoughts. So either if it's either meditation or through prayer, just getting in touch with the source of creation is going to improve your life. There is no way your life cannot be improved if you get in touch with the source of life. So either if you do it through prayer to whatever God that it is that you would like to pray to, that's great. Or if you do it, if you achieve it through meditation, your life is going to improve. So if you need help meditating or learning how to pray, I'm sure any or some of the coaches we can help you with that. You can find me on Jonathan R Coaching on Instagram, also on alivedesign.org and jonathanrcoaching@gmail.com.
Oh, very good. Well, I have a final thought, and I shared it a little bit before we got started. There are 30,000 different kinds of spiders in the world. We live in a world of great diversity, including spiders. And I just have to think that our Creator, who can make a world requiring 30,000 different kinds of spiders, has created many different opportunities to get to know creation, to pray, to meditate, to be in harmony with whatever your world looks like. The trees, the plants, the flowers, the people, you can engage in a way that is devotional for you, connecting to the divine for you. And here at A Life Designed, we have a team of coaches who can help you find your way to the right balance and harmony for you and how you interact with creation. Wonderful to have you all here. We'll see you all at the next one.